So, hi, Andrew. Lovely to see you today.
Hi, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us on Scamp Stories, where today our focus is going to be on International Men's Day.
Excellent.
And so, what would be great, Andrew, is if you could just give us a little bit of an introduction to you as a speaker, just so that everyone out there knows your background.
Thanks. It's lovely to be here. My name is Andrew Pain. I lead in my work on men's mental health, talking about, well, why are men and boys struggling? And practically speaking, how do we help men and boys to be the very best version of themselves? I also have a podcast, Men On Show, that celebrates the work of amazing men and also gauges their opinions on modern masculinity.
Do you think that men and boys are struggling more in 2023, or is it just something that's being discussed in more detail?
I think it is being discussed in more detail. I think if you look at some compelling data, most people are aware of the tragedy of our suicide statistics, that 3/4 of people who die by suicide are in fact men. But if you look more broadly than that, 85% of rough sleepers in the UK are actually men. 95% of people in prison are actually men. And the surprising stat as well is 60% of victims of violence are actually men and boys, but there isn't an official government strategy to tackle violence against men. And so I do think if you look at the data, there are challenges today, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why men and boys are struggling.
Tell me a little bit about why you think International Men's Day is really important.
It creates a focus, starts some conversations. So leading in my work on men's mental health, I'd be a bit worried if I wasn't, but November, I'm very, very busy, which is wonderful. But those talks are conversation starters. They are organizations saying, oh, hey, Men's International Day, we should really do something for that. What are we going to do for that? And then a speaker like me might come in, and then off the back of me delivering, there's some stuff that might start to happen. Or often what's really encouraging is there are already men's networks, and they are booking a speaker for Men's International Day, and it's a company-wide thing, but the men's group has taken that initiative. They clearly have some budget to book a speaker. So I think it's about creating a bit of a focus, starting conversations, challenging the notion, for example, that men won't talk. But actually, we know from research from the University of Manchester that 2/3 of men that die by suicide reach out for help in the months before their death. This idea that men don't talk is a nonsense. But Men's International Day is a chance to sort of talk about some of this stuff, raise some of this stuff, which I think is crucial to creating this thing that we're talking about, allyship. So important.
And indeed, the theme for this year's International Men's Day is around male suicide, which seems to be one of the biggest crises that this generation is facing currently. So I think any opportunity to bring that to the fore, but let's make no bones about it, talking is great, but funding is what's needed. Funding, infrastructure, and making sure that at all levels from childhood right the way up, that support network is there.
Yeah, I think there's funding, there's infrastructure. There's some understanding as well. So I know when I did my mental health training, if someone around me was, I might be worried that they might be about to try to take their own life, I wouldn't have known that. I would have probably danced around the suicide word, where actually mental health training, it says actually, no, the more direct you are, have you thought about taking your own life before? Might you be having suicidal? I would have thought that'd be the worst thing you could do, but actually apparently it's a really helpful thing to do. So some of it is understanding, and that understanding also is in terms of the breadth of issues that might be at play here. So for example, and this really sort of surprised me, it's been sort of a big piece of learning for me this year. I've done quite a lot on testosterone, and levels of testosterone are dropping across the world quite substantially. So the average amount of testosterone that a 62-year-old European 62-year-old man would have had back in the 80s is what is now the average for a young healthy male in his 20s or 30s. I mean, that's a staggering drop.
Is it because we're not as physically active?
There's a whole host of reasons. There are the usual suspects. We know, so for sugar, for example, if I today eat right now, if I drink a can of Coke and eat a Mars bar, it's about 75 grams of sugar. What will then happen over the next 2 hours is my testosterone levels will drop by 25% because my body's making the insulin, it can't be making the testosterone. We know from sleep deprivation, when they've put men in a laboratory setting, that where they've tested men's testosterone levels at 8 hours sleep a night for a week and 5 hours sleep a night for a week, that the men on 5 hours sleep a night for a week, their testosterone levels are 10 to 15% lower than the guys on 8 hours of sleep. So sleep deprivation, sugar, sedentary lifestyle, of course, indoor lifestyle. So vitamin D is a key driver for testosterone production. But understanding actually that some of these things will drive how men feel about themselves. We know that the lower your levels of testosterone as a man, the more likely it is you are to be depressed, the more likely it is you are to have a heart attack, the more likely it is you are to have things like excess body weight, abnormal levels of cholesterol that can rise to type 2 diabetes. We know that poor physical health has an impact on male mental health. And so actually talking around testosterone, having these conversations, this is what Men's International Day is all about, improving understanding, because the triggers for a worsening mental health, the triggers for suicide are hugely varied. I think that's part of the complexity. If you then add into the mix that for many men, they don't have a social circle that they can really open up to in that way. And we add, many men live alone in that midlife band, I suppose, where the risk is the highest. Many men will be living separately to their children and living quite isolated lives. And it's trying to understand all the things that come to play that impact male mental health is really important.